Bitcoin dominance is one of the most important metrics in the entire crypto market. It tells us how much power Bitcoin holds compared to the rest of the space. And right now, I'm tracking a massive setup on the high time frame that could shape the next 24 months for cryptocurrency. And if this plays out, we could see Bitcoin dominance begin to drop significantly here. And that has huge implications for altcoins, potentially setting the stage for one of the biggest rotations we've seen in crypto in years. Today's video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly what this setup looks like, the key levels I'm watching, and what it could mean for your portfolio as we dive deeper into this cycle. My name is Paul Sampson. Welcome back to DataDash. Now, one of the big conversations around dominance is about positioning, how much exposure you want to Bitcoin versus the altcoins. But the truth is, the bigger picture goes a little bit beyond just crypto. And a lot of smart investors are also diversifying into real assets such as gold and silver if they haven't already been, both which have been performing absolutely incredible as of lately. And that's where iTrustCapital comes in. With iTrust, you can actually buy and hold Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other top cryptocurrencies inside your IRA, but it doesn't stop there. You can also add physical gold and silver into that same account. So you're not just building exposure to crypto, you're actually building a diversified retirement strategy with multiple hard assets that historically hold value. It's a really unique platform because it combines long-term tax advantages of an IRA with the assets we actually believe in for the future, such as crypto and gold and silver. And here's the best part: if you actually use our code DataDash8, iTrust will give you $100 to jumpstart your investment. I'll leave a link down in the description below where you can learn more about iTrust and see if it's a right fit for you. All right, folks, this is the dominance chart here. Again, the Bitcoin dominance. This is how much money and capital in the market is allocated in Bitcoin compared to anything else, obviously. And what this means is that when this chart is going up, generally the majority of capital is sitting in Bitcoin, basically. It's not usually the greatest for altcoins when this chart is going up. That means that everyone is choosing Bitcoin over altcoins. And when this chart does start to break lower, that means capital essentially is rotating out of Bitcoin and into the altcoins. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean everything could explode at all at the same times. Obviously, there's going to be individual winners and things like that. So you have to kind of be choosy on what you're looking into. But overall, when you have these really big, massive drops, it's when we see basically the entire market see a very nice move to the upside. And this is on a weekly time frame here, folks, that I'm looking at. So even though this looks very small and short term, this is basically dating all the way back to 2017. All right, so 2017, which is when I started investing and trading in this space, we saw pretty much the most notable altcoin rally at that time due to dominance just taking a complete nosedive. I think this dropped let's just take a look here, about 65% almost. And during that time, again, you see altcoins completely rise as this chart is coming down. It's an inverse correlation between the two. Then we have obviously a push to the upside here, which was essentially the 2018 bear market. So while the dominance was increasing here, the altcoin market was going down. And another thing here is that even though the dominance is increasing to the upside, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin's price has to increase. And actually, one of the worst things you could see in this market is when Bitcoin's price is dropping as well as the dominance increasing. That is probably the worst case scenario, I guess you could say, for the altcoins, right? So on the flip side, the best case scenario for altcoins is actually when Bitcoin's price is increasing and then the dominance is coming down, because that not only means that the Bitcoin price is increasing and turning to the upside, but it also shows that the altcoins are tending to see some of that rotation come out of it, where investors and traders are choosing to uphold Bitcoin's price while also going more into the altcoins, right? So that's the best case scenario. So very rarely do we get those days, but that is something we want to see. So anyways, folks, we've got, again, the 2017, huge drop here, which was amazing for altcoins, into the end of 2017 where that bull run pretty much stopped. We had the bear market of 2018, okay? And then we had the last notable area where Bitcoin dominance really took a plunge was in 2021, all right? So if I was looking at the Bitcoin price right now, this was when, basically Bitcoin broke its previous all-time high around that time frame. And at that time, it was trading at $20,000 a Bitcoin. And we rallied. So even though Bitcoin's dominance dropped here, Bitcoin's price action at the time actually rallied from 20 to 60,000 during this window, again, back in 2021. And then, of course, the altcoins absolutely exploded as well, right? So again, it wasn't everything, but you did have some really big winners. There was things like 50x moves in a month, basically, at that time. and which we hadn't seen anything like that since back in this region. So again, this was actually a best case scenario because as the dominance was dropping, Bitcoin's price, I don't have the chart obviously right in front of me, but I know the numbers of it. The price of Bitcoin was increasing here from 20,000 to 60,000. Okay. And then at the same time, dominance was dropping so that even though Bitcoin was increasing in value, the altcoins were seeing the majority of the capital in the market. So it was a really, really great time there. Since then, we kind of flatlined around this bottom area here with some bursts, and don't get it, twisted that any of these smaller rallies here still equated to some really sizable moves. Similar to what we saw even just last year at the end of 2024, where we had just a few weeks where the dominance in Bitcoin took a 10-15% pullback, and the altcoin saw a really nice time at that point. Like again, that's when XRP pushed up 700% in 1 month. HBAR the same. Several other assets moved pretty well. Pretty much everything had 100 to 200% push. As far as the majority of the market went. And so those bursts can come, but the really big drops are what people are truly looking for, waiting for when they're talking about an altcoin season, because that's when you get just monster moves, right? Question is, are we going to see one of those again, right? And I think everybody's getting very tired and phased out at the moment. They've been waiting so long. Technically, I covered the other day how due to timing at this point, we've spent the exact amount of time that we spent in last bull run. So in 2021, the whole Bitcoin bull run, that amount of time has elapsed basically this week on the week of September 29th of 2025. So technically the whole bull run time frame that we spent last time is already up. And it feels like the altcoins have not moved, even though they have several times. It just hasn't been one of those really big 6 months in a row, just nothing but, waking up to 50% gains. So the question is, are we going to see something along those lines? And I alluded to the overall setup that is at hand here. And one thing I was looking at with Bitcoin specifically over the last few years was this like slow trek up. And if you're familiar with investing, trading, or even just looking at charts in general, right? You get what's known as the staircase up, all right? And it generally leads to an elevator down, all right? I think we have a recipe for something along those lines, very similar to this, right? Where we kind of took the stairs up. This was a little bit more aggressive at the time, of course, but you get the elevator down. You get the slow kind of grind, and then you get a huge drop to the downside. This is about as staircase up as you can get. And now like the question is, what can we look for to kind of indicate any kind of downside here? So what I'm looking at here is just the overall range that Bitcoin dominance has been putting in for the last several years. Once again, we have some really key areas down here at the bottom here. And when we took this last little drop, we fell back into this range here. Okay. So for now, to me, as long as we're living within this region, which is about 61.5% or lower, that we are well within this range. We've put in a significant little high here. And now looking at, identifying the key trend here to signify if this is going to be a sizable downtrend, we just need to come up and confirm a lower high basically, right? So you can see here that along the way, we put in our high, we've come down, we've made a local low across here. Ideally, we want to get below this last swing low, which is sitting about 54.76. So if we were to come down and do something along these lines, push back up, that would really confirm a nice sizable downtrend here. Again, this is a weekly time frame on dominance. Overall, though, I think that this does set us up to run this range in the next coming years, I think. So this is big time frame here. I would assume that for us to kind of come down to these levels here, it'd probably take us at least 1 to 2 years from now. So along the way, however, just like along the way that we came up, there can definitely be some times where Bitcoin dominance snaps back, right? Where we come back up, we hit the high. And again, in a short term, if we see a move like that, that could equate to just a short term month, 2 months, 5 months maybe, where the altcoins may not perform well as again, and all those things. And, it still kind of elongates that process. I believe that we are in a position where over the next 24 months into 2027, that we could very well see a huge drop in dominance. Essentially looking for that elevator down scenario. Again, there will be bursts back up to the upside. So there's not just going to be a down only type of situation. And with this chart, again, down on dominance means the altcoins do well. I have a huge thesis that's all wrapped around this 2027 timeframe as well. That's aligning with the 20-year housing market cycle and the first 20-year crypto market cycle, and all these things that just are happening to align at this point. And on top of that, we're at a time frame here as we're at the end of 2025 now, where everyone is going to be really focused on that 4-year cycle theory, which I think is just completely out the window at this point. I know that I've touched on it a few times where like some of the timing is aligned well, but I don't think that we're going to see that traditional 80%, 70% Bitcoin drop, as we walk into 2026, as all these things. And I think we could see a couple months where we do come back down to that $80,000 range. I've covered that very, heavily the last few months as in a, overall dropping thesis. But my main idea and my main focus here, folks, is that one, we could very well push up to new all-time high first before we get any sizable rejection, right? The 130 mark still remains my area that if we're going to see a sizable correction out of Bitcoin, 30% pullback, it's going to come from that 130, 140 range. 30% pullback takes us back down to 80K. Maybe that happens over the next few months. Maybe as we start into the next year, again, that's going to get everybody arguing, right? In the sense of where people are going to say the bear market's here, blah, 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 sell everything. Maybe that's only a few months, right? And then we end up actually, hitting a nice little low. I'm just totally what ifing right now. And into that 2026 timeframe, Bitcoin dominance comes up, puts in its lower high here. And this can get all the way back up to even 65% and still be considered lower high, just so we know. Roll over and then ultimately start making its trek down into this region, okay? And again, you can see down here at the bottom here, that's like 2028. That's a little, widespread, but I really am looking at that 2027 timeframe. Again, this chart goes down means altcoins go up. And then that is perfectly aligned with this huge bullish reversal on Ethereum BTC, which has been a 6-year-long reversal setup. Been tracking it since 2023. Was able to even time the bottom. I missed it by a month as far as exact, targeting, but was very well aware. This is what kept me really grounded around the lows, especially on Ethereum when we came down to 1,400 earlier this year. And the overall idea is that ETH would outperform Bitcoin up into these regions, more than likely get a little cool down, which I think we still could see where we are, push up a little bit more first before we get a sizable correction, okay? That also aligns with Bitcoin pushing to like 130-ish now before any kind of pullback. From there, as we walk into next year, we get that next leg up to the next major target, which again was a 1.5 to 3 years target mark from this point right here, okay? So that's April of 2025, year and a half puts us in, mid to late 2026 by maybe the time we're hitting this, again, December 2026, through November 28. And I don't necessarily know if it's going to take all the way to 2028. But the overall idea here is that all things would rise into this region, into this time frame. Again, there's so many altcoins that, maybe not everything really explodes to the upside. There's going to be some winners. I think, you should allocate, of course, to your own liking and to your own risk profile. Big one for me is actually Ethereum, just because of all charts, the ETH versus BTC one is the one I'm actually looking at here. So Ethereum to me, I think has some really nice upside potential over the next 24 months here. It's already up 250% just from the beginning of the year from the low. And I think that the dominance is really showcasing a big drop potential here over the next 24 months as well, which, like I said, you're in a period where everybody's kind of maybe giving up on altcoins, but I think that I think that everyone's expecting them not to perform at this point, right? So, and then if we go a few more months like that, if we get to a point where Bitcoin pushes up to 130, and as an example, new all-time high regardless, and the altcoins still don't really perform like everybody would like, maybe, we're going to see a push up, don't get me wrong, but, everybody wants that like 5, 10, 50x type of moves. And if we don't get that right now, 5-6 months go by before we actually, kind of roll over again, first quarter of next year, and then we see the altcoins really shine. It's hard to know, of course. I've gauged a lot off the ETH BTC pair to where I'm looking at Ethereum outperforming, in which usually that means the altcoins would outperform as well. And to me, some of the altcoins have. Many have not, of course, but it just depends on your entry and your timing. Everybody wants to come into this market after rallies, and then they get frustrated when things cool down for a few months or they drop a bit because they're coming in at the end of a move, basically. When you want to be invested and want to be getting into these things, it's when it's boring, man. It's when it's scary, right? It's when everybody's not talking about it, when it feels like it'll never move. You don't want to come into something when it's already pushed up, when somebody like myself or somebody that has been watching something for years and accumulating at the lows are up several 100%. That's not a good risk management, so in my opinion. So I think the key here is to really throw out the 4-year cycle theory as far as the timing would go. Just utilize and view this market as an asset class and as an existing tradable market, right? So we just have to roll with the punches in what we have and the information in front of us now. So at the end of the day, Bitcoin dominance isn't just another chart. It's a lens into how capital flows through this market. Understanding where that dominance is headed helps us prepare whether it means Bitcoin continues to lead or altcoins begin to take the spotlight. I truly appreciate you all spending your time here with me today at DataDash. If you found value in this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already so you don't miss the next update. Until then, everybody, stay focused, stay disciplined. I'll catch you all in the next video. Cheers.